Well, I started photography when I was a junior in high school. I believe I was a junior. This was in the early 50s. Some locals decided that they'd rip me off, and they did. They stole all my guns. My rifle and shotguns, and I had a pistol, and it was gone. My mother gave me a check she got from the insurance company for $160, and I bought a twin lens camera. I don't know why I bought the camera. I just don't know. Paul? This is Peter Miller calling. I'm good. It's taken a while for me to get going, but getting behind in work and so forth, but I'm still alive and still kicking and still doing this thing. So what I'm wondering is when is a good time to interview you? Are you going to be in your garage? Well, I could come down. Started taking pictures at school, and there were no teachers, no nothing, so I'd sort of made some of my own equipment. I didn't know what a contact sheet was, and sometimes I'd get prints made by a local photographer. So I taught myself. Started to photograph the people around me. There were 13 hillside farmers in western Vermont where we lived. And I often would walk the fields woodchuck hunting, and I'd meet them. And then sometimes I just went out of the way to meet them, and they knew who I was and why my family came up and where we're living and what are you doing? They were curious. And I got along with these people very well. And one of them was Will and Rowena Austin, who lived across the valley. I could see their house from our house. When I first went up there, the two of them were on the porch. And Rowena was rocking, and her husband was there with a pipe, Will, smoking his pipe. I just walked up and I said, hi. And I sat down on the porch and we started talking, and they knew me. And I had the Rolleiflex. I had this, or a camera like this. It wasn't this one, but it was very much like that. And you can take this camera and you can go like this, or you can go like this. I opened it up and I sort of went like this because Rowena said, no, you don't take any pictures of me. And I already had.
We were talking about you.
You're talking about me.
Yeah,
Everybody talks about me. That son of a bitch from Waterbury.
No, it wasn't a negative manner at all. I was telling him how important I thought your work was and how happy I was you were doing this. I think it's very worthwhile.
But it was that start between the farmers, and maybe that's why I like the Vermonters so much, because I like them all. And then I went up to the University of Toronto and I met Yusuf Karsh, and the next thing I know went for a summer with him in Europe in 1954, I think, and photographed people like Picasso and the Pope and Albert Schweitzer and Albert Camus and a bunch of famous people. So I learned Karsh's technique, and he's probably one of the better photographers of the last century, the portrait photography. He had incredible lighting and very good technique, but basically he could take an 8x10 camera, set up the background, have me fix the lights, and then he would stand on the side and talk to the people and take the pictures, and he got the reactions from them, and he tried to capture their personality. He didn't try to do what Hollywood does and make fun of them or make them some sort of creature. He tried to capture their humanity, and he did a very good job of it. And so I learned from that, but I said, I don't want to photograph famous people. No, I'm more interested in street photography. I was a GI, a Signal Corps photographer, and I lived in the center of Paris, and I went around, and I just went out and found Paris, and so my education was Paris. But I learned stuff in the university, but I learned everything from that city. I learned about light, I learned about the museums, I learned about the Impressionists, I learned about wine, good food. I learned about cities, I learned everything. And then I went to New York and realized that photography is a little weak in one way. They said that a photograph worth 10,000 words. That's not true. Maybe there's 10 photographs worth 10,000 words. Some of them worth 1,000,000 words, particularly those shot in Vietnam. But mostly no. You have to know what's going on. And that's what I went to Life magazine, because they combined text about the subject and big photographs, so you could go back and forth. And that's where I realized that the writing is very important, and I went to Life to learn that. And it took a while, but I did learn it. And I think about it as I remember talking with a friend of mine. He said, "Peter, when we're ready to go, you shoot me, I'll shoot you."
Yeah, I've had several people say to me the best thing that can happen is we can drop on the floor and that's it.
Yeah.
Because as far as any kind of, and that very likely is what will happen. Who knows? But I think about that more and more now.
I got my byline in Life, and after one story I wrote about 13 times, and the editor kept turning it down, and finally I said, "Oh, the hell with it." And I picked it up after a couple weeks, and then I just wrote it again, gave it to him. He said, "It's perfect, what'd you do?" I said, "I dropped it," and then I just picked it up and wrote it real quick. He says, "Well, you're a writer now." And they published it, and I quit. Subconsciously, I knew I didn't belong. So I came back to Vermont. I had 2 young kids, a beautiful place to live, and all of a sudden I was just a nobody. I had the best job in journalism. I gave it up to come back to Vermont. I left Life, and I came up to Vermont, and I had 2 kids, and I realized Vermont's a very good place for kids. Because of my brother, I moved up to northern Vermont. I did start that ski magazine, or at least the editorship of it, and he ran the business out of it, and that went kerflooey in 1968, when a lot of other businesses went down. And then I got divorced. The magazine went broke, I got divorced, I didn't have a cent, I had nothing. And that's when Ted Ross, my friend, we did a lot of skiing together and hunting. Particularly we hunted and fished together. And he said, "Look at the bright side of this. You got your car, you got your fishing rod, you got your shotgun, you got your dog. You don't need anything else." I started working for Ski Magazine, and I started going down to New York regularly to work and get more clients for writing and photography, and I started to travel a bit, and then I traveled more and more and traveled more and more, and then I traveled all the time. And after a while I just got tired of it. I'd wake up, I didn't know where I was. Down in New York, I met people. I said, "Hey, we started a new business with photography on stock photography. We're going to sell it to businesses. Why don't you join us?" I said, "Well, why not?" And they told us. So I started shooting pictures of New York, shooting pictures in Vermont, giving to them. I ended up one of their better photographers. And they said, you're sort of in between graphic and art. And he said, "But you're doing well." I didn't know that. And the editor I had, Jean, he's French, when I came back from a trip to India, he said, "Your pictures are no good. Why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this stock stuff. You have more talent than that." But he really gave me a lacing. And then I thought about it, and I came back to Vermont, and I said, you know, I went to Life magazine to learn how to write, and I learned layout at the same time. And I knew photography. I knew that from high school. It was just natural to me. So I said, well, I'm going to do some books. And that's when I started the Vermont People book. And I was told by everybody I was going to fail. People up who were familiar with books and publishing that I knew, don't do that, Peter. That's too regional. You're not going to do anything. And everybody was telling me what a stupid idea. And then I was going to do it in black and white, photographs of people, Vermonters, and no colored leaves, and no red barns, and no nothing like that. I couldn't find a publisher. 13 publishers turned me down. And I went to a bank. I said, hey, would you lend me some money? They did. They lent me enough money on my house, of course, to get enough money to get that book going. And I started the book, and I found out, because of the photography I'd always done black and white for myself, and always portraits. And I think it might be something I picked up from Yusuf Karsh when I worked for him. I found out I didn't have enough for a book. I went out and shot more portraits. And I interviewed the people, and I listened and looked and so forth. And I did short pieces. It's all 2 pages at least of each person, big photograph and write-up. And the write-up was real journalistic lifestyle, right to the point. It was a good book, and it was a hardcover. And then I tried to sell it to some of the bookstores, and they said, did you self-publish this book? I said, yes, we don't take self-published books. It's like I came from the wrong side of the tracks. It meant that I had a lousy book that wasn't edited or done correctly and so forth. Vermont Life said it'll take you 10 years to sell 2,000 books. Some people look at it and say, this is interesting, I'll take some. All of a sudden, whammo. I was delivering cases of books night after night over to Burlington, up to Stowe, and down to Vermont, southern Vermont. The book came out, I think it was 2.5, 3 months, and it was 3,000 were sold out. It's just gone. I had to reprint. I reprinted, and 15,000 eventually were sold. And I could have sold more, but I just said, that's enough. And from there, I did other books. And some of the books of Vermont farm women did well. I did the Plains book. I lost my shirt on that. It cost me a lot of money. And that's when I came back to Vermont. I said, I'm going to stick with Vermont. I'm going to stay as small as I can. Because money was never the attraction for me. It's basically doing what I like to do, which is photography and writing.
Really, if you keep that wood fire going, and of course my wife, she got used to the heat. So now, goddamn, if it drops below 75, she's freezing, and of course she's tall and slim, so.
The old Vermonters used to keep it at 80 degrees.
Oh God, the bastard, yeah. Especially in the kitchen. Yeah, all right. So what are we going to do here?
Well, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk.
Okay.
And I'm going to figure out where you go, where I go. When I first meet somebody, unless it's a spur of the moment type thing, it's just one photograph, I usually say, hey, I want to come up and visit with you. Now that's a Vermont term, I want to visit. Now that means sitting down in the kitchen or someplace and talking. And that's what I do.
We were dirt poor over in Newbury, and I forget, oh I know, she went to the bank in Wells River, that little bank in Wells River. And which isn't even a town, it's a village in the town of Newbury on the Connecticut River. And she knew that the guy had a kid, so she called someone about this guy's little boy, and it found out it was his birthday.
You
so
talk
she took
with somebody and you're doing an interview, you better let them talk. Don't lead them, because you're sitting there and then all of a sudden things just sort of, nothing said or something, and you're just sitting there and looking at them. All of a sudden that person, man or woman, was, well, and then they'll start, and sometimes they'll take a left turn. And there's another story, and there's the story. You keep your mouth shut until it's finished. Or you might direct it a little bit and say, oh, tell me more about that, you know. I've come back from some interviews absolutely exhilarated what I learned, or what was said. I got a story. I knew I had a story. I don't know how you know that. Maybe I learned it at Life magazine when I was reporting. I had a story. And I found out that my stories don't have to be big stories or little ones. You gotta dig a bit. The fun part is interviewing people and taking pictures. People like my photography probably because it's simple. It's not confusing. And maybe it's pictures I take. I have a picture of a cow, people love it. I have a picture of a certain people that just happen to become icons of Vermont. When I take a bunch of pictures and they're pretty good. And I look at some of them I take and see, that ought to be 5 feet tall and 10 feet wide, but there's nobody up here that's going to buy a picture like that. And besides, I can't afford to do it. Well, when I first started, it was just, I sort of winged it, and I didn't take many notes with a tape recorder. I do now, because one, I find people are saying, I didn't say that, and I know. The other reason, I want to catch the feeling of their flow of conversation. Sometimes just a sentence, but other times it's a flow. And my writing is a flow with it. And I have to put that together. And I have to do it fairly quickly. Like, I write once, I read it, and I write again. I read his notes or her notes, and I do it again. And then I put it down, I read it again, and it's got to have this flow. The Irish comes out in me. And it's all the Irish, because the Irish are sort of poets in a way, the way they flow words. And I can do the same. And I like to get the feeling of the people in there. What I learned from Jean down there in New York is we all have talent. But if you don't take responsibility for your talent, you've messed up. And he's right. You have to do the best you can with what you have. And I have mediocre talent, but I have a lot of drive. And that's because that's one reason the books are done. I don't quit. It's a snapshot. Sun's got to be down. Too bright out. Not even worth a tripod. It's the only thing I really wanted to do was to communicate. That's what it is. When I look at it, to communicate. I think there are other things down below that I did it because it's getting into other people's lives, or maybe I don't have much respect for my own life, and I live vicariously with these people, or I don't have many friends, but all my friends are the people I photographed. Maybe that's another thing I do, is I learn from these people. I learn about their living. Maybe it is I live vicariously. My life is really quite boring. But it's through them that maybe my life is, I don't know, I've never really thought about it.
Vermont PBS, partnering with local filmmakers to bring you stories made here. For more, visit vermontpbs.org.